everyone. Today we're going to be going over the Virginia State Court System. The Virginia State Court System is part of our Virginia Judicial Branch. And as we've reviewed today, our Virginia Judicial Branch interprets laws. Last week we spent some time learning about our Virginia Legislative Branch and our Executive Branch. We learned that they're the ones that make and enforce the laws, but a lot of times laws need to be interpreted, which leads us to our Virginia State Court System. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to open your packet to this page in your packet. Here is where you're going to write down any notes that you have from your PowerPoint. You'll notice that there are blank lines. You will place in the missing words in those lines. So now we're going to start with the PowerPoint. So as we learned when we did our federal court system, we learned that there are 50 separate state courts. That there is a dual court system where we have our federal court system and we have our state court system. So we have 50 separate state courts, one federal court system. And most of the work is actually done within the state. This happens because most crimes actually occur within one jurisdiction. And because federal courts only deal with federal laws and crimes against our country, most of the work is done at the state level. As we just mentioned, they are in charge of interpreting and applying laws to Virginia. Last week we spent some time researching state laws, and we found out that there are many laws that are a little confusing. And so a lot of times we'll need to say, how does this apply to my current situation, or what exactly does this mean? And that's where the courts come into play. Courts get their power and organization from the Virginia Constitution, just as we've learned with the legislative and executive branches of the state as well, and also Virginia laws. Local courts, we're going to talk about some lower level courts. They actually get their power to review cases from the state legislature, which we've learned before is our General Assembly. Just like we learned with our federal courts being a mountain, we're going to learn about the state courts also being a mountain as well. Only this one is not going to be as tall or as high as our U.S. federal court system. However, since most of the work at most cases are heard at the state level, there's more state level cases that are heard, and there's more levels. So I'd like you to make sure that you fill in your pyramid just as you see here. If you notice, we have the General District Court, Juvenile Court, and Domestic Relations Court. You'll notice that these courts all have the same powers, and I think that's going to be filled in, but hold on. Format sheet. No fill. Sorry about this. Okay. You're going to notice, if you would circle those courts, that will be very helpful. You'll notice that all of those courts are going to have the same types of powers and also the same organization. Our circuit court is one level higher, and this is going to be probably the most common court that you've seen. You might want to star this court, because if this is the court that you would most likely be seeing on television, because this is the court that would have a jury trial. If you are ever called in summons for jury duty, you would be at the state level, you would go to circuit court. And then we have a court of appeals, which is going to act very similarly to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And then our highest state court is our Supreme Court of Virginia. Now we're going to look into each court. We're first going to start with our juvenile court. Our juvenile court is only for those people that are accused of crimes that are under the age of 18 years old. They are not legally an adult. There is a judge, there is no jury, and they have original jurisdiction. And as we talked about today, you guys realized and remembered from our previous unit, original jurisdiction is the power to hear a court for the first time. Juvenile court's very unique because they're not interested in just punishment for a crime. They really know that sometimes kids make mistakes, and so they want to rehabilitate a child and have them learn from the situation so that they are able to become a better person. In serious situations, though, juveniles may be tried as adults. On that same category, we also have another specific court called the Domestic Relations Court. This is a judge and no jury, and original jurisdiction, just as we saw before. And this court so those cases would be heard for the first time. And this court is going to deal with family cases. So they're going to deal with cases of custody or divorce cases, Again, sensitive nature, so they're just going to have a judge, no jury, and again, they just want to find a solution to a problem. These courts all fall under what we call our general district court level. Again, as we circled them before on the mountain, you notice that they have a judge and no jury, so they have the same kind of classifications. They also hear civil and criminal cases. For criminal cases, they're going to hear cases for the first time about misdemeanors, and we learned that misdemeanors are minor crimes. They also may have your preliminary hearings for felony cases. These judges may hear the preliminary hearings to see if there's enough evidence to bring it to trial. We also sometimes call this like traffic court, where you would go in and plead your case. Cases in the U.S. District Court go very, very quickly, one after another. General District Court also hears civil cases. Again, remember, this is where no crime has been committed, but it is a dispute between two people. In General District Court, if you are suing for an amount less than $15,000, it would be heard at the General District Court level. We also have a special type of court for cases that are only asking for less than $45,000 in $4,500 in compensation. We call those small claims court. This is like your Judge Judy. Small claims court is like your Judge Judy, your Judge Joe Brown. Again, if you notice, it's only a judge determining the case, and normally they're asking for only minor amounts of money. Circuit court is the most common court that you probably see on television. It's a judge, and there is an option that they could have without a jury, but 99% of the time there will be a jury there. They're going to have original jurisdiction for civil and criminal cases. Civil cases for anything over $15,000, criminal cases for felonies. So if they're being charged with burglary, armed robbery, murder, the case will first be heard in the circuit level court. They can also hear appeals from the district level court. So this is one of those courts that has both original and appellate jurisdiction. The Court of Appeals in Virginia has a panel of judges. There's 11 judges. There is no jury. And just like we learned in the U.S. court level, the U.S. Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction. And their main purpose, if a case goes to the Court of Appeals, they're mainly looking to see if rights have been violated or if the trial went fairly. They're not interested in hearing both sides of the argument. They're not going to find whether somebody's guilty or not guilty. And they can review a case and determine whether the decision should be upheld, whether the court case should be remanded, or whether the reverse decision should be made. And lastly, at the very top of our state pyramid, we have a total of 7 justices, 1 chief justice, 6 associate justices, and again, no jury. They have appellate jurisdiction. Okay, they're going to review decisions from state constitution if there's an issue with whether or not something was constitutional on the state level. They're going to deal with death sentences. Anybody that receives the death sentence in Virginia has an automatic appeal at the Supreme Court. It is the court of last appeal in Virginia. However, you may still appeal beyond that. Okay, so if you make your way all the way to the Virginia Supreme Court and you feel that your rights were still violated, you can appeal one level higher to the Supreme Court. This is kind of where I talk about mountain jumping. If you make it all the way up to the state court system, you can then jump across and land on top of the U.S. court system. Okay, it's tough and it's not easy, but it is a possibility. And just like our U.S. Supreme Court has sometimes a very rare case that can be heard, this one does too. This is a limited original jurisdiction. We call this is when if there is a lower level judge, one case that would go to a Supreme Court is if there is a lower level judge that is being accused of inappropriate behavior as a judge. Maybe he's accepting bribes, maybe he is not ruling fairly. That would be reviewed at the state Supreme Court level. Now, one thing in Virginia that's very different is in Virginia, all judges are actually elected by the General Assembly and serve term limits. So in the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, we learned that they're appointed for life. That's not the case. In Virginia, they serve term limits. Only our federal judges are appointed for life. All right, so I'd like you to make sure that you have all of this information. We will review all of these courts and characteristics tomorrow. Thank you for watching this.